Gospel of John, in his prologue, he claims this is a face value reading.
I'm spending Boxing Day getting annoyed by people responding to my boyfriend.
Hey, Shannon, didn't mean to mess up your Boxing Day. We don't actually have Boxing Day here in America. We just try to kill our seasonal depression with monkey bread and puppy chow. Anyways, I like Paul. He's my favorite counter-apologist, so I take it when people respond to me as a compliment, which is why I'm making this video right now. So if I'm understanding you correctly, it seems like you have some issues with the Gospels being written in Greek, but Jesus speaking in Aramaic thing. So let's hear what you have to say.
But what language were the Gospels written in? The first-hand accounts, the people that were there with him, that decided to follow him because they heard what he was saying and agreed with it, what language were the Gospels written in? The answer is Greek. The answer is it's Greek. It's Greek. So why is it that the people who, in a population that was like mostly illiterate, let alone having more than one language that they speak, why was it that the people that decided to follow him because they heard what he was saying in Aramaic wrote down their firsthand accounts of their lives with him in Greek? Almost like they're not firsthand accounts.
Yeah, I guess I just don't find this whole Greek thing all that mysterious.
Greek. I'll bet that's Greek talk.
I know it's super common to think that Jesus only spoke in Aramaic, but there's actually some pretty interesting evidence that suggests that Jesus probably did speak at least some Greek. As I'm sure you're aware, since the time of Alexander the Great, Greek influence and language had spread throughout the areas that he conquered, so that by the time of Jesus, even Jerusalem's ruling Jewish council was called by a Greek name, Sanhedrin. Jesus came from Nazareth, less than 4 miles from Sepphoris, which was the capital of Galilee in Jesus' early years. Matthew even refers to it as Galilee of the Gentiles. Historians tell us that Lower Galilee was the center for trade among the Mediterranean, Sea of Galilee, and Decapolis regions. Sepphoris was predominantly Jewish, but shows significant outside influence, including a Roman amphitheater. Jesus and his legal father Joseph are described by the Greek term tekton in the Gospels. This term means carpenter or builder. It's likely that they would have been involved in major construction projects in the area and had interaction with Greek speakers. In fact, it would have been impossible for them to conduct any form of business without handling coins inscribed in Greek writing. Furthermore, archaeologists have shown that the majority of funerary texts from Palestine at that time actually in Greek. Then there's also Matthew 5-7, Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. It opens with the Beatitudes in Matthew 5:3-11. The first 4 Beatitudes begin with the alliteration of pi, while the famous expressions poor in spirit, thirst for righteousness, pure in heart, persecuted for righteousness, all involve alliteration and assonance, which seem to suggest that Matthew portrays Jesus' teaching on this occasion at least in Greek. The fact is, the popular idea that Jesus didn't speak in Greek is open to serious challenge.
Are you challenging me?
Finally, publicans worked in cooperation with the Roman superiors. They would have had to provide documentation of their collections and speak with them, so Matthew likely had to be bilingual. And Capernaum was a fishing village close to Tiberias. It had a high population density and was likely bilingual. So fishermen like Peter, Andrew, James, and John would have had to know some Greek for business. Also, the names Andrew and Philip were Greek names. Thaddeus and Bartholomew also are names derived from Greek. So Jesus and his apostles probably could speak some Greek. But why would the apostles write in Greek? For starters, at least according to the church father Irenaeus, John wrote his gospel in Ephesus, so it would make sense for him to write in the native language. Irenaeus would be in a good position to know this because he was a student of Polycarp, and according to Irenaeus, Polycarp was a student of John. Now, somebody might ask, well, how could a simple fisherman write an entire gospel in Greek? Well, this is a little bit like saying, how could a person with a grammar school education write something like Macbeth? Furthermore, some scholars have pointed out that John's Greek is full of characteristics of someone whose native language was Aramaic. The limited vocabulary, the simple syntax, the use of conjunctions all point to this conclusion. Several times when John quotes the Old Testament, his quotes are closer to the Hebrew text than the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation that Jews often use in Jesus' day. That's just John. Let's talk about the synoptic writers. Why would they write their Gospels in Greek? Luke was a traveling companion to Paul and not a direct eyewitness to Jesus, but he did have access to witnesses based on his travels with Paul to Jerusalem and locations nearby. We know that Paul wrote his letters in Greek, and as a follower of Paul, Luke would have been interested in writing a gospel for the same audiences that Paul was writing to. Mark was also not a direct witness, but the fathers are united in saying that he was a companion of Peter's. And Clement of Alexandria specifically says that Mark wrote while Peter was still alive in Rome. If he was a scribe while Peter was preaching in Rome, it's very likely that he's going to be writing in Greek. Matthew is much more controversial.
Sounds controversial.
The early church fathers are unanimous in saying that Matthew originally wrote in his native language, or the Hebrew dialect. The book was then interpreted or translated, presumably into Greek. Notice that the fathers do not tell us who translated Matthew's gospel into Greek. The church father Papias just says that each person did so as he was able. For what it's worth, in the 4th century, St. Jerome wrote that Matthew first composed his Gospel of Christ in Hebrew letters, and that a copy was preserved in Jerome's day in the library of Caesarea. Jerome also admitted that who it was that later translated it into Greek is not certain. Of course, everything we now have of Matthew's Gospel is in Greek. So what exactly is up with that? A biblical scholar by the name of Theodore Zahn hypothesized that Matthew's original document was more of a compilation of Jesus' teaching, but after Mark's Gospel appeared in Greek with a narrative framework, someone, maybe Matthew or someone working with him, worked on an expanded edition that slotted Matthew's material into what is, in many places, Mark's narrative framework while rendering the whole into a better Greek than Mark's. This hypothesis has the merit of invoking no purely hypothetical documents, like the Q Gospel that many scholars accept, but has increasingly come under question in recent times. This isn't a popular view, but I think it does have some merit. Nevertheless, I wouldn't be super dogmatic about it. So there you go. I hope this at least gets you thinking and isn't too obnoxious. It's rather likely that Jesus and his apostles could at least speak some Greek. And the apostles had some very good reasons to write in Greek, considering it was the lingua franca of the time.
That's weird.
No, it's not weird.
I guess I just don't see this problem as really all that super weird.